That was a pretty big example of oversteer, but it doesn't have to be that big for us to see it in the data. If we have a steering sensor on the vehicle, we can use that along with the GPS or the acceleration channels to dig in and see the nuanced oversteer and understeer before it gets that big. This is a great way to help the driver work through feeling the vehicle and seeing, is it understeering, is it oversteering, and it lets you work to engineer the chassis to get it faster. Let's dig into some data and see how we can do it. I'm starting out with a simple time distance graph. I have my laps on the bottom and a track map. One of the things I like to do here quickly is I just like to pull up the steering channel so we can work through and see what that looks like a little bit. When we look at the steering channel, we can see a whole bunch of stuff. One of the things that sticks out, I have really active hands. You can see me working on the steering wheel a lot. Probably a discussion for another video. The big thing you can see is areas like right here where the cursor is. These areas where you have steering one way, a whole bunch of opposite lock, and steering back show oversteer. But we can dig in and see, is this a big one, a little one, and really what's going on if we add some more graphs. The graph I'm going to add here is a scatter plot. And what a scatter plot does is it lets you chart two variables against each other. So you're going to have steering and lateral Gs and be able to work through what's going on. So to do that, we're going to go over here to the lateral G button. You can see this one has an XY on it and it says show the scatter plot. When we open that up, it's going to default to some channels and they might not be the ones we really want. I'm going to remove RPM and speed, and then we'll be able to build the graph that we need. I'm going to put in here lateral acceleration, and I like using the GPS measures. And then for my x-axis across the bottom, I want to have steering position. And I can do a few things here, is I can right click it and choose to use it as the x-axis, or recently they've added this neat button right here. And what this one does is it lets you add it without having to do anything else. So now we can see, here's my steering position across the lap. We're still zoomed in because everything's linked, and now we can see it across the whole way. What we see here is it's still even zoomed in on the graph. And one of my favorite parts of Race Studio 3 is being able to double click on an axis to get it to auto scale everything. So I'm going to come in here and double click them. Now, inside this graph, we have steering position on the bottom, left to right, and then on the vertical, we have our lateral grip. When we look at these, we want to have a relationship where the steering increases lateral G. When you have more steering and you don't get that increase, that's understeer. And if you have the lateral G up and the steering's coming out, that's oversteer, where it's starting to go down. So when we look at this information, we can make a quick assumption about how the vehicle is. The straight part through the middle is neutral. The zones where it starts to level out, those are understeer. The zones opposite of those, where the steering goes the wrong way for the G-forces, is oversteer. So, like I said, one of my favorite things is being able to pick a point and start going into it. I can see this trail right here coming out of this corner. So we can start zooming in and see we have a story where it was pretty linear and then it kind of goes off the rails. So let's pan through our data a little bit and see what happens. Now, the power of Race Studio 3 shows up when we want to add video to this. So what I'm going to do quickly is right click, add a panel to the right, and choose my SmartyCam video. So now I have data and the video, and I can see everything that's going on. We can hit the play button, play through, we can drag through, we can use our pointing and everything else. And then as we approach this next corner, we can see there's understeering. You can see my hands crank in more and come out, and that's the noise we have in the XY. And then as we approach the apex, we can see I've picked up some amount of throttle and we start to go to oversteer. And what's interesting in these spots is you can also see it in your hands. Remember, everything's linked. So my video position, my cursor, and my cursor in the XY plot are all put together. So as we scan through, we can see my hands opening up to the right to save that initial slide. It comes back and we pick up our way out of the corner. And then I crank in enough steering, it starts to go to understeer. So you see the finish of the corner. We come back, we're fairly neutral. On the way out, we can see this big amount of oversteer, some amount of cowboy exit. And I'm seesaw on the wheel, getting to the exit. So this gives us a really powerful way to start to build in what our vehicle's doing. If you have a steering sensor built in from the ECU that you get to your AIM device, it's great. You can add a steering sensor by using a string pot, a linear potentiometer, or one of the belt kits. Or if you have the newest Micron 6 on your cart, that has the steering position built in, so you don't even have to add a sensor. This is a great way to start looking at chassis dynamics and see, is this understeer or oversteer caused by the driver? Did they do something with the pedals where they popped off the brake pedal, let the front end unload, started to understeer? Did they mash the gas, break the rear loose and get the oversteer, or some other combination? So use the data you have to start improving the driver's performance and the chassis performance.